All right, everyone. So I thought I would just completely, radically nerd out and give you all a really, really nerdy top 10 list, okay? And so this top 10 list that I'm about to give you, I'm calling the top 10 book publishers, Christian book publishers. And so it's practical because you need to find two or three that are really reliable, that you can really trust. And some of these others are, there's a lot of hit or miss because not everything published is like, orthodox and helpful, and some of it's way too heady and academic and not practical enough for daily use. But there are different publishers that focus in on different aspects of Christian living. And of course, Christian living is not just for people in the pew, it's also for pastors and for elders and for deacons and things like that. So, certain book publishers kind of aim their audience for certain parts of the church to kind of find their niche to help, not to sell books, but to be helpful for Christians and Christian ministry. So I've kind of compiled a quick top 10 list, and I'm not approving of every single thing these publishers publish, okay? Please don't read that. I really would hope you don't do that. But I am going to try to commend 10 publishers for their strengths and things that I would really say, this is a great publisher for this reason. And because of that, you can trust them, I think, in that area for that reason. And it's also just a really good opportunity for me to completely, wildly geek and nerd out. So my top 10 list of Christian book publishers. So number 10, I'm going to say is Fortress Press. Fortress Press has been known for a very long time as being kind of the widely kind of catch-all publisher for more Lutheran works. However, they publish other things, but typically they publish fairly specific Lutheran, though some Reformed Christian books too. The reason I like Fortress Press is not really because of their books on Christian ethics and other things. They're almost beyond progressive into liberal and some other problematic ways. However, they also publish some really good stuff, specifically, I think, by two authors that I'm not going to agree with everything about, but these authors need to be read. They need to be wrestled with. They need to be, they need to be read so they confront you, okay? So there's two specific theologians I read Fortress Press for. One is Jürgen Moltmann. This is one of his books, The Trinity in the Kingdom. And as you can see, Fortress Press, it's got the big F right there. And they publish pretty much all of Jürgen Moltmann's books. He has a lot of popular level books that I think are really, really good. One is Jesus Christ for Us Today. That's an interesting book to read. One is The Living God and Christian Life that came out just, I think, last year. Very good. Again, he has some interesting takes. I would not agree with much, actually, of what he has to say. But some of what he has to say is so profound and reorienting and grace-fueled. It's just worth always reading. So Jürgen Moltmann is always published by Fortress Press. Super, super good. And of course, my second theologian published by Fortress Press is none other than Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer had all of his works, called the Collected Works, 17 volumes of writings and letters and teaching lectures and things like that from Dietrich Bonhoeffer's very short life. He did not even live to the age of 40. But they have compiled it into 17 volumes. And some of you are like, I'm not going to read that. Of course you're not. That's why they made a reader's edition of 4 volumes. And this is one, Life Together. And you can see down here, reader's edition, okay? And this reader's edition has footnotes, or I think actually they have endnotes. It's not a bunch of footnotes, and he got a little intro there for you to help you set the context of the writing. Of course, his other famous book, Discipleship, very, very good. You can buy a reader's edition of 4 of his famous books, Ethics, Letters and Papers from Prison, Discipleship, and Life Together. You can get all that together for like $30 from Fortress Press. I mean, that's worth commending. Dietrich Bonhoeffer is possibly one of the greatest theologians of the church, though I would say for sure of the 20th century. He needs to be read. We don't need to agree with everything that he writes, but much of what he writes is incredibly inspiring, reorienting, grace-fueling. It's powerful stuff. And again, you won't agree with everything you read of his. That's why you read people, to be challenged and to have conversation, not just to have someone pat you on the back. Let's get beyond that, okay? So Fortress Press, very good in that it publishes some very weighty, important Christian thinkers. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Jürgen Moltmann, very important thinkers for us to wrestle with for our time. The second one is a very different publisher. It's called Christian Focus, also an imprint of Mentor Books. And I love this publisher because they publish some academic books, but they publish a lot of great practical books on Christian living, including for youth and college. One book they printed recently is called Insecure by John Parrott, and it's talking a lot about how to overcome insecurity, finding its rootedness in sin, and allowing us to find our greater fear, not in how secure we are or what we feel about ourselves, but a greater fear in the fear of the Lord from Proverbs 1:7. I love Christian Focus, Mentor Prints, because they have academic stuff, they have practical stuff. They're just really good, consistent books for Christian living and Christian thinking. So Mentor, and you'll see it kind of on the back here, that's the Focus imprint. There's an M for the Mentor, but they look the same with the color scheme there, the red, the blue, and then that little circle with the F or the M in it. It's very, very good. There's a book back here, right, where is it? That guy right there, Robert Culver's book right there, that is Mentor as well. That book is a great book of academic stature as well. So really, really good book. The next book I would say that I think is pretty helpful is Zondervan. This is hard to put it on the top 10 though, but I think there's a reason I can put Zondervan books on the top 10. I'll tell you why first I put them on the top 10, and I'll tell you why I hesitated, okay? The first reason is because they've got great Bibles. Zondervan produces good Bibles, very useful Bibles. I've got just, one example. I've got the NIV here, Zondervan imprint right here. They just have really good Bibles consistently. They're just applicable for all ages and families, and they're very helpful to have. Again, for different reasons that you buy different kinds of Bibles, the way they're situated to teach. The reason I hesitate to put Zondervan on the top 10 is because they really are what we call a mass market Christian bookseller, meaning they're not very discerning about who they publish. And so what you get a lot of times is you'll get these great Bibles, and then sometimes you'll get great books, and then other times you're going to get basically fluff at best and heresy at worst. They're going to publish almost anything because they're not a church, they're in it for profit. But there needs to be integrity with Christian publications. And I always hesitate with Zondervan. There's always a sense of they just kind of mass publish whatever that sells. And there's not enough integrity, I think, sometimes in their publications for Christian living, Christian theology, and the like. So I hesitate to recommend Zondervan because of that, but they have such good Bibles. The way they produce Bibles is great and very helpful, and they have a lot of variety there. So I would put Zondervan probably at number 8. Number 7, kind of a tough one here, but I think it's probably about right. It's a little bit more of an academic publisher, but they have actually 6 different imprints. So kind of brands of books that they publish. There's a couple that are academic. There's a couple that are like pastoral, and then there's a couple that are like tethered, that are kind of tethered to charismatic Christianity, and another group that's kind of tethered a little bit more to to evangelical Christianity. They're not always the same, okay? They're connected, but they're not the same. So they kind of have all these different prints, and they also have more fiction. Baker Books is who I'm talking about. They have more fiction. There's just so much diversity in their publications. I personally love them specifically for their academic and pastoral titles, and they're very, very good. Just as one example of Baker Books, I've got hundreds of their books. But Millard Erickson, you can see the B here, Millard Erickson, a well-known, very well-respected Baptist theologian, not Southern Baptist, but a Baptist theologian of just, I think, great standing through our culture because of his fidelity to the Scripture. And people from different denominations recognize, I think, his learnedness and his effectiveness in teaching true, healthy theology. So Millard Erickson's printed by Baker. I've got hundreds of Baker books to give you, but what I think I like about Baker consistently is they have a lot of diversity in their prints, but there's so much good stuff across the board. Fiction, nonfiction, academic, pastoral. There's some emphasis on charismatic ministry, and there's some emphasis on evangelical cultural issues. They just got lots of wide-ranging stuff. And I think more consistently, I've rarely questioned Baker Books' integrity on what they publish, just in general. Now, there's going to be obviously those here and there, but there's just more integrity, I think, in how they publish books. So really love Baker Books. So I think I put that as number 7. Yeah, number 7. Number 6. Okay, so this one has really started to creep up on the top 10 list for me. Now, it's a very specific niche publicator of books, okay? And it's really good, it's outstanding, but they're traditionally academic, okay? So if you have kind of a penchant for, I want to learn something rigorous, I want to learn something specific about, Reformed theology, or I want to learn something specific about such and such thinkers' views on, the whole gamut. Or I want to know about how does Christianity understand reason and revelation. Or I want to understand how Martin Luther understood the use of the Psalms. Like, these are very specific academic questions, aren't they? But there's a certain publisher that's really honed in on that in the last few years, and their name is Lexham Press. Lexham Press, okay? Right there. And just a couple books I've pulled out just to show you. One is they have published the lectures, the teaching lectures of Geerhardus Vos, a famous Princeton theologian from the turn of the 20th century, a little prior and after. He was kind of at that transition phase. And they have published pretty much all of his writings and lectures into a 5-volume Reformed Dogmatics. They've actually now published it as a 1-volume, 5-part. It's like 5 parts into one. And so you can see it right here. It's Reformed Dogmatics by Geerhardus Vos. Okay, and Vos is fascinating, but he's very challenging to read. But Lexham does a great job of publishing a lot of his stuff, most specifically his 5 volumes. So this is the 5th volume, I think, of the series here. And also, they've just keep up in their game. Like, you know what? Why stop at Vos? We can go with Abraham Kuyper, okay? Abraham Kuyper, man. So Abraham Kuyper, famous Reformed theologian from the Netherlands, again, kind of at the turn of the century, later, more 19th century than 20th, really 19th century, but his effect is massive in the 20th century and beyond. And he's affected, Calvinism, Reformed theology, public theology. He was a statesman. He was the head of the state at a time. He has, I think, 6 or 7 volumes of writings that they have collected into his series. And this one is the second part of a 2-volume that he wrote on common grace. Meaning, how does God commonly work in the world without this, what we call special grace, which is where God had to kind of break through the fallen image of man, the sin barrier that has affected us so profoundly. There's a special grace that breaks through that, and that's kind of what we mean by common and special. Common grace is, the food God gives you every day, the air, the H2O you breathe every day. That's grace, but it's common. The special grace is how God particularizes his grace in the work of his people and in his world, okay? So this is, Lexham, you're awesome. They're a little expensive, but man, just some great stuff. So Lexham Press. I think number 5, if I can find, I've got a lot of books hanging around here, guys. I'm sorry. There it is. Number 5. This one could be a little bit higher. It could. But I love this publisher because they kind of straddle classic Christianity and critical Christianity. And I like that. I appreciate that. The Reformation slogan of reformed and always reforming. There's a lot of people like, I'm reformed. But are you reforming? That's the slogan of the Reformation, not we're reformed. It's we're always reforming. And so I think Eerdmans publishers really embody that sense of reformed and always reforming. There's a lot of stuff they publish I really don't like, okay? But there's so much they publish that's just wow, that stuff's good. And so they've got academic stuff, they've got cultural ministry kind of things, they've got some really good pastoral stuff. They published a number of important series of books on theology, really in the last couple the last couple decades, specifically G.C. Burkauer's works on dogmatics. They published that on print. I had them print that off for me and paid for it over a number of months. Very, very good. They've got so many good little titles along with academic titles. So I'll share with you first the just practical titles that they did recently, a couple, and then one real short academic title that I've been finishing up here. Two books that just got, actually it's a two-part of three. I haven't bought the third one yet. But Rowan Williams, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, for plain speak, he was the head honcho of the Anglican Communion from England, okay, the worldwide Anglican Communion, okay. So Rowan Williams, being Christian, this book will wreck you. I mean, in a good way. It'll wreck you. You're like, this is so beautiful. So beautiful, profound, reorienting. Thank you, Christ. Thank you, Christ, for the gift of Rowan Williams. So good. And there you go. Eerdmans, man. Very good book. You can read this book in one sitting, but why read it once? Why not read it 5 times? Why read it one time through when you can take your time through the chapters? Man, what a great book. Another book he wrote called Being Disciples, and these are collections of his lectures. And oh my gosh, this book is so good too. It focuses a little bit more on Christian living, whereas Being Christian is more of like the rituals and the rites that God has instituted to form us, to bring us into the body of Christ. So Being Christian is a little bit more of, as he puts, baptism, Bible, Eucharist, prayer, kind of the way that God kind of forms us. Whereas Being Disciples has more to do with living as Christians in this world. So it focuses a lot more on the Holy Spirit's dynamic of filling us and empowering us to live for the Lord. These are great practical books, very easy to read. An academic book that's outstanding is by Anthony Thistleton. Boom. There it is, Eerdmans. That's the more traditional logo they have. And Thistleton's little 1-volume systematic theology is just, it's so good. It's 450 pages. You can make it through in a summer or something, read 30 or 40 pages at a time, and you just get a summary view of what Christianity is taught along these major themes. There's biblical references to help you, but it's more theological, and then it's trying to help you understand how the Bible, sciences, psychology, all these other resources kind of come together in a lot of ways to form healthy Christian theology along with Christian history. It's really, really good stuff. He's an Anglican too. I'm not an Anglican, but I like to read Anglicans from time to time. So what did I put for number 4? Number 4, I think I put, there's a lot of books here, so I'm trying to figure out where I put stuff. Number 4, I think is, it's Reformation Heritage Books. I'll be a little short on this one. Reformation Heritage Books is has been around for a little while. It was started by Joel Beeke, who is a well-known kind of renewer of the Puritans. And Joel Beeke is great, very gifted preacher. I'm sure incredible pastor. I've not been pastored by him, but incredible pastor from just the ministry he's had. And one of the major parts of his ministry has been publishing books, old books. Now he's got some new books too. And I'll show you a new book and I'll show you some old books. But this guy he's a machine. He's a machine. And I mean that in a good way. So he published a couple years ago a great book called Meet the Puritans. And Reformation Heritage Books got kind of this cool little logo with the Bible open here, RHB baby. So really great book. And so you can look at like Richard Sibbes right here, okay? You can go through his biography in 7 or 8 pages. And what's so great about this book is that it itemizes their main publications and it gives some commentary on it, and then it provides the best edition of that book. This is an invaluable resource for every Christian because it gives you kind of a guide to reading Puritans. You need to read them. Now, they're not all great, okay? Some are problematic, actually, but by and large, they're all very, very good, okay? They're very, very good, all right? And then what about not a new book, but an old book, a republication? This is the 3-volume, and I've been reading through parts of it. I'm going to be starting on one of them, actually today, on raising children. And this is William Gouge's book. He was part of the Westminster Assembly, okay, in the 16th century, or 17th century. And William Gouge put together this awesome collection of sermons, primarily, on building a godly home, how to minister to your family. Man, do we need that today, right? Man, do we need the church to focus in on just family ministry again. There's all sorts of methods that the church is really trying to reorient now and minister to the family. And it's a great shift in Christian ministry. So William Gooch's 3-volume Building a Godly Family, outstanding. So Reformation Heritage books, boom, great. Number 3, and this one's hard because the top 4 are probably kind of in their own category for me. But number 3 is P&R publishers, Presbyterian and Reformed publishers, and they are really, really, really good in Presbyterian and Reformed publishing. If you're not a Presbyterian or Reformed, you probably won't, think it's that great. But I think it's wonderful. I think why I like them so much is that they publish a lot of contemporary stuff, and then they publish a lot of classic stuff, kind of similar to Reformation Heritage, but it's less Puritan, it's more Presbyterian, and kind of just generally Reformed stuff in Presbyterian literature. So as an example, I've got 2 of Gerhardus Voss's books that they published that are really good. One's called The Pauline Eschatology, about what Paul said about the end times, and then some really great lecture collections and writings of Gerhardus Voss's redemptive. It's called A Redemptive History and Biblical Interpretation. Very, very good. Short essays from lots of his different news articles and journal article publications and lectures that he gave that you can read that were collected nicely by P&R and put together for a pastor or an interested layperson's use. P&R has got so many things. They've got the writings of Benjamin Warfield. They've got John Frame's stuff as well. I've got John Frame. Gosh, I can't point back there, right there. They've got lots of good stuff that you can really pull from. I really love David Powlison's Christian Counseling Ministry as well, that they publish most of his stuff. They've just got some really good things from P&R that you just can't go wrong with. I can really recommend pretty much anything that they print, along with Reformation Heritage. Not Eerdmans, but I can recommend pretty much anything that P&R publishes. Last 2. Then we'll be done. Number 2 is known to be a publisher of old books and Puritan literature. And they are the one and only Banner of Truth Trust. And, there's so many reasons I can recommend these guys. You're not going to find a book that will not glorify God. That's for sure, okay? You won't. You're not going to find a book that will not bring some glory to God in a positive, elucidating, illuminating sense, okay? Not every book is helpful, okay, and they would be the first to admit that, but they're not just trying to sell books. They're trying to publish books of relevancy and importance to support and to build up the church. That's why there's so much integrity with they print. So the first is what they're known for best, the Puritan paperback series, and you can buy all of them if you want. Not all of them, I think, are helpful, but most of them are great. My favorite Puritan, John Bunyan. John Bunyan, man. His book on prayer goes through 1 Corinthians 14 specifically, and it talks about praying in the Spirit. Very, very good book. Of course, they also print his 3 volumes of work. Everything he ever printed, they put together in 3 volumes, including The Pilgrim's Progress. There's a number of other great books. Pilgrim's Progress is actually 2 books, not just one. And he has many others. Holy War, a few others that are very, very well known. And he didn't write just allegorical works like that. He wrote a lot of practical pastoral books. He was in pastoral ministry as a Baptist for a long time, and he was in prison for 12 years and printed a lot of his most famous stuff while he was in prison. Some of the greatest Christians were in prison, right? The Apostle Paul, Martin Luther King Jr., Dietrich Bonhoeffer, right? John Bunyan. Many, many others. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of nameless Christians that no one knows that were in prison for the glory of the Lord Jesus. Incredible stuff. So John Bunyan, someone you can trust, someone you should read. Really good by Presbyterian, of course, Banner of Truth. And of course, they published Gerhardus Voss too, his famous biblical theology, kind of a time-tested classic in its own right. Of course, if you're a Presbyterian, like I am, you're going to love, oh my gosh, the newly printed Westminster Confession with the Confession, the larger short catechisms, and the directory for public worship, man. This directory is so good. It's so helpful. And then if you like collected writings of people, such as James Henley Thornwell and others, They've got all of that stuff. They got all that stuff. They publish everyone's collected writings. I don't know how they afford it. They must have extremely generous donors, but they publish everyone's stuff. So you can think of John Owen, Richard Sibbes, John Bunyan, John Flavel, many, John Knox, many others, John Newton, lots of Johns. So you kind of get the hint there, okay? So what's my number one Christian publisher? If it's not Banner of Truth, or it's not Reformation Heritage, and it's not P&R and others, it's not Zondervan, Ross. What's the best publisher? I think the best publisher really consistently is Crossway. I think Crossway is the best publisher of Christian books. Not because they're the best publisher of academic Christian books, but they are the best publisher of across the board Christian books. In every category of their publications, whether it's cultural wisdom, whether it's ministry, pastoral or laity ministry, whether it's academic ministry, whether it's just evangelism or fiction or nonfiction or academic books, they're just consistently better. They're just so good, I think, at not just the integrity, but they're really infused with the best, in my view, of evangelical theology and Reformed thinking. Now, they're not reformed, but the Reformed thinking blended with evangelical theology is just, there's just second to none there. So I'll give you a couple little titles here. One, this is for a student series called Reclaiming the Christian Intellectual Tradition. This is so good. This is by Riken. I think he's still the president or the provost of Wheaton up in Illinois. And these are just short little books for students to read through to reclaim the intellectual tradition of Christianity. Crossway, of course, also produces I think it's the 14-volume works of John Piper. That's just another example of academic. They publish almost all of the works of J.I. Packer, the famous Reformed Anglican who was also a well-known Puritan in his own right. They publish a lot of really good stuff. You can't see it back here. No, yeah, you can. I can't do this finger thing right. There it is. The Carl F.H. Henry series of 6 volumes, right back there. They just republished that a few years back. They publish a lot of good Bible studies, a lot of good fiction work. They're just really consistently good. I actually really like also, I don't have it with me, it's in my library here. They have a great series they just started doing called Christian Thinkers on the Christian Life. And it really puts into perspective how's their thought play out in Christian living. I just love that. That's my favorite kind of subject, because Christian theology is to live. We're to live it. We're not to think it, just to think it. We're to think it and to do it and to live it and to worship God. And so it's like Christian Thinkers for Christian Living series. I think they're on like 20 or 30 thinkers now, and I've got 5 or 6 of them, but they're very good. They even did Bonhoeffer, which is kind of interesting to me, given that Bonhoeffer is not considered, I would not consider him an evangelical in the traditional sense. He's an evangelical in the historical sense, but not in the traditional sense. So I really want to encourage you all, find a couple good publishers of books and start to buy books from people you can trust and learn to read. Christians before the advent of media and technology, this is how they primarily learned and engaged the world. And I'm not going to say that they were better than us, but they were definitely quicker in their understanding of the faith than we are, and they were less watered down and less saturated with cultural and secularism than we are. So we need to learn to read and recover for our path forward, and good books are a big key, I think, to that. So I hope this helps you for my top 10, and I hope you find some good books and have some happy reading.